Welcome to Bits About Books, the home for conversations with authors of breakthrough books on sales, marketing, and business. I am your host, Shubhanjan Sarkar, founder of Pitching, the next generation buyer-seller engagement platform, where our mission is to make buying easy. Our guest today is Peter Cohan, and we speak with him about his latest book, Suspending Disbelief, a collection of sales, pre-sales, and marketing stories and lessons learned.
Started to hear people repeat these stories. So most of these stories I used in Great Demo and Doing Discovery workshops as a mechanism of increasing retention and improving learning. And I began to hear these stories told back to me and told to others. And I suddenly thought, ooh, this is really intriguing, and maybe this is important. Maybe these should be captured. So I socialized some of the stories around, asked for people, what do you think? Actually sent out some emails that said, are these stories any good? And people came back saying, you got to publish this.
Have you ever seen a bad software demo or suffered insufficient discovery? Peter Cohan is the founder and principal of the Second Derivative and the author of the Great Demo and Doing Discovery methodologies, focused on helping software organizations improve their pre-sales, sales, and marketing results, primarily through improving organizations' demonstration and discovery skills. Before the Second Derivative, Peter founded the Discovery Tools business unit at Symyx Technologies, where he grew the business from an empty spreadsheet into a 30 million per year operation. Prior to Symyx, Peter served in marketing, sales, and management positions at MDL Information Systems, a leading provider of scientific information management software. Peter currently serves on the board of directors of Collaborative Drug Discovery Inc., is an advisor to IN2SV Inc., and a mentor to StartX, the Stanford University startup accelerator. He holds a degree in chemistry. He has also been and continues to be a prospect and a customer. Now, onto this insightful session with Peter Cohan. Peter, welcome back on Bits About Books. This is your third outing on the podcast. I'm delighted and thankful.
Third time, that's right. Third time's a charm.
They're all charming, believe me. And I always have excellent conversations, and I look forward to these on and off camera. So I appreciate you're always making time and coming back.
It's mutual.
Of course, thank you. Before we dive into the book, I'm curious. After Great Demo and the book on discovery, what made you write this book?
Interesting question. I was just thinking about that, trying to put in my own mind, well, what caused me to start? And the answer is actually very simple. I started to hear people repeat these stories. So most of these stories I used in Great Demo and Doing Discovery workshops as a mechanism of increasing retention and improving learning. And I began to hear these stories told back to me and told to others. And I suddenly thought, ooh, this is really intriguing, and maybe this is important. Maybe these should be captured. So I socialized some of the stories around, asked for people, what do you think? Actually sent out some emails that said, are these stories any good? And people came back saying, you got to publish this. This is gold. This is there were a number of people that said, this is the stuff we want. So there you go.
Yeah. So tell me, so you just mentioned that you have been using these very stories in the workshops and the trainings that you conduct vis-a-vis Great Demo and Doing Discovery.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sort of pointed out to you that if they're put together, they will add value. Now, my question is, how did these stories come about, and how did you actually integrate them into your workshop? Where did that happen?
So, wow, very interesting topic. So way back, so first of all, I'm not actually delivering workshops anymore. My
Yeah.
voice gives out after about an hour or 2 hours, so I have colleagues, the partner organization, that actually do the training sessions. So these stories are my stories. My partners tend to use their own personal stories, so that's part of the equation. However, way back when I first started delivering this kind of training, I found that when you tell a person a fact or a concept, their likelihood of remembering it is really pretty low.
Correct.
When you offer an analogy or a metaphor, the retention of that the idea tends to go up fairly dramatically. However, when you wrap that key idea, the meme, in a story that follows some of the important storytelling attributes. For example, the attributes in Made to Stick. Then people tend to remember those stories, and not only do they remember them, but they can retell them with high accuracy, high fidelity, months or even years later. And so that's what caused me to begin to incorporate them into workshops, as I realized that if you really want people to retain some of the key ideas, in many cases, you've got to wrap them inside a story. And actually, I've got an example of that. Would you like it?
Yeah, of course.
So I'll give you I'm really curious about this. So for the audience, you grew up and are located in India, correct?
Yes.
Right? And
Yes.
I grew up and I'm located in California, which may or may not be considered a part of the United States. Anyway, and okay, so the punchline of this story, the takeaway message is slow and steady wins the race. Okay, what's the name of that story?
Oh, yeah. I mean the rabbit and the hare.
Yeah, the rat or the tortoise
Sorry,
and the
sorry.
hare.
The tortoise and the hare. Sorry, yeah.
The tortoise and the hare. Okay, perfect. Now, who captured that story, and how long ago did that take place?
Well, if my memory serves right, it is part of the Aesop's fables, and that by definition is couple of several hundred years, if not thousand.
Yeah, so that's it. That is exactly accurate. It's one of Aesop's fables, and he lived about 2,600 years ago. And the story was in use before he collected it. He simply brought together apparently a series of these stories and fables, and it, was known as Aesop's fables. But they are in use way before that. But here's the really interesting idea, and that is that the takeaway message, the slow and steady wins the race, is boring. If you have children, right? If I recall correctly?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so if you tell your teenage son or daughter, if you just work hard and persevere, dear lad or lass, you will do well in life. Now, what will be their reaction to that little bit of wisdom?
I don't think they'll react, maybe shrug.
Yeah, they'll shrug and they'll go, yeah, okay, first of all, it's not on TikTok, so I'm not even interested. However, when you wrap that wisdom, you wrap that idea inside a story that has these key storytelling elements, it's got an element of surprise, it's something that's relatable, it's got the Chip and Dan Heath storytelling elements from Made to Stick, that story can live for centuries, or in this case, for millennia. So that's the idea behind storytelling, is to encapsulate an important idea that on its own will fall apart. It's not as memorable. To encapsulate a key idea in a story that enables it to live for a long, long time. And as I said, to be retold with stunning accuracy. And that's the power of storytelling, and that's the power of stories. So Suspending Disbelief is designed to do exactly that. It's to present these ideas, but in an engaging, bite-sized for the most part, and humorous way, so that you have to sort of convince them to learn methodology or learn those kinds of skills. Stories enable people to convince themselves. Does that resonate?
Yeah, totally. In fact, there are so many things running through my mind at this moment. Uh, I was listening to a Yuval Noah Harari interview about his one of the latest books he wrote called Nexus, and how human beings communicate across millennia and so on. And storytelling was a very integral component. I mean, the point he was making is that listening to stories and communicating through stories has been in the human gene for possibly 10,000 years. And that's why we respond so well to stories, right?
And I would I would add to that. I mean, it was really only after Gutenberg got going with the movable type printing press, and obviously took a few hundred years after that, that stories could really get disseminated in written form to the general public. But as you point out, for tens of thousands of years, or maybe even longer, the sole method of communicating ideas and wisdom and learning in a repeatable, consistent way was through storytelling. And I love the example of the Norse sagas, and the Indian stories that are even more deeply woven and interrelated. And people could retell those stories word for word over a course of hours.
Yeah, and across generations and hundreds of years, the same stories got told. In fact, one of the things that I attended a lecture, and a professor from Indian professor from South India, but he now teaches, I think, in Princeton, and he was talking of how actually a lot of the stories and the nuances were lost after printing began, because the voice and tonalities which would actually communicate a part of the story was lost the moment it was put into print.
So you just answered a question for me. So I've released Suspending the Disbelief in paperback and Kindle formats. And my original plan was to record the audiobook version myself, using my own voice. Originally, I was going to do that for Doing Discovery and Great Demo, but I kept cracking myself up and I just couldn't do it. And my older daughter, who actually wrote the foreword and did the copy editing for the book and has done the last two books, my articles, said, you gotta read it. You have to read it. It's gotta be done in your voice. And then yesterday, I got an email from from Amazon Kindle saying, "Hey, we've got a new AI tool that can read your stories for you for the audiobook version." And I thought, oh man, maybe that's an easy way out. But you just convinced me, no, I have to do it myself, because the way that I tell the story is the way that to a certain degree, it needs to be consumed.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Interesting. Thank you.
The other interesting thing that was coming to me is that, you, in many ways, your involvement has been in the science of, I mean, not so much in Doing Discovery, but in the Great Demo part, the storytelling, maybe the stories about your product, whether you tell it backwards or forward, that's a separate premise of Great Demo. But it is still a narration that you want to do, and you want to touch people, right? And and where I'm going with this question is that, to me, they were pretty scientific in terms of being a book, both the books, because you are really talking of stuff which is empirical.
Yes.
Based on data, right?
Yep. Yes.
And now you have written stories. How are these two processes different, or are they not different for you?
I would say they are not different. What I don't have is the data for storytelling. What we have is an enormous amount of anecdotal evidence. And I've seen it personally when, as I said, when I hear people retell stories that I told in Great Demo workshops to others, and they retell them very, very accurately, I'm like, oh my God, this is It's an epiphany. You realize that, okay, here's a way to communicate information very, very successfully, and a way that actually ensures high fidelity, high accuracy. So I don't have, yeah, you're absolutely right. Great demo and doing discovery as well are both based on a lot of empirical data of doing the numbers and seeing the results and tuning and changing and improving. I'm a chemist by training, and I always say, run the experiment. Don't guess, run the experiment. In this case, I've been running the experiment, but I haven't collected what I would call sufficient empirical data to make any particular substantive claims. In this case, I would say the topic is ripe for additional research. By the way, that's what every researcher says as they think, I need to get funded for this project next year.
It's time for a short break. Stay with us. After the break,
I would say the huge majority, not all, but the majority of the stories are real life experiences that either I encountered, enjoyed, or suffered from, or were directly related to me by somebody that had that experience. The very first story in the book for me is epiphanal, if you will. It's the logo slide story.
You are listening to a Business Podcast Network original. Podcasting is the fastest growing content marketing opportunity, which is untapped. We can help you craft your audio strategy and help leverage the wide reach and easy streaming capability that the smartphone penetration provides. It is easy, it is powerful and personal. Talk to us to find out how podcasting can help you build your brand and reach out to your targets like never before. Write to us at bpn@bizcast.in. That is bpn@bizcast.in. Business Podcast Network. Podcasts end to end. Welcome back. I'm Shubhanjan Sarkar, your host for Bits About Books and founder of PitchLink, the buyer-seller engagement platform. Let's dive right back into the episode where we left it. Are these stories something you made up, or are these stories culled from experiences that you have had while going into a workshop or talking or listening to stories from your colleagues who actually now run these workshops all over the world?
I would say the huge majority, not all, but the majority of the stories are real life experiences that either I encountered, enjoyed, or suffered from, or were directly related to me by somebody that had that experience. The very first story in the book for me is epiphanal, if you will. It's the logo slide story, and it's real life. This is way back before the turn of the century. I was working for a Silicon Valley company, fabulous new disruptive technology. We were all about our technology and being ahead of everybody else and excited. And our modus at the time was, we would go to a large organization, we'd get a meeting, and the first thing we did was we inflicted, and that is the right word, a corporate overview presentation on the team, on the group, the prospect. And, we would have, it was the classic awful corporate overview presentation. We talked about our founders. We talked about our funding. We talked about our technology, our history, our people, none of which our prospects cared a whit about. And then for the pièce de résistance, we would put up the logo slide, which we were enormously proud of, until one meeting, I put up the logo slide and I see two people in the front of the room lean towards one another and whisper back and forth. And as one of the guys is whispering, he's pointing up at the slide. And being the way I am, I said, would you mind sharing what you guys are saying? He says, yeah. He says, you see those guys in the bottom left-hand corner of the slide? And of course I did. And he says, we think they're idiots. We would never buy anything that they would pursue. That cured me. And so, the moral of this is, well, we as the vendor may be proud and think very, very highly of our our logos. But we need to make sure before we start offering social proof and references, we need to make sure that they are actually relevant and effective for our audience. And then far too many logo slides and corporate overview presentations are out of alignment. They're big, huge logos, and you're talking to a tiny startup, or whatever the situation is. Anyway, that experience was mind-opening, and I realized, no, we got to stop this. We've got to stop inflicting corporate overview slides and assuming that everybody loves our logos. And instead, guess what? We got to do some discovery. So that was an example. It was a real life experience. It was an epiphanal moment for me, and it's the kind of thing that needs to be shared. And that's part of, when somebody asks, why did you write the book? I've been, I hate to admit this, but I've been in this industry, if you will, for about 45 years. Yeah, I'm that old. And there's a lot of things I've learned that other people don't have to learn the hard way. And in fact, if they can learn it an easy, fun, engaging way and avoid these kinds of things. I mean, it took me, I can't tell you, let's see, it took me about 18 years before I had that epiphany. 18 years of customer-facing activities before I suddenly realized, oh, logo slides out of alignment, corporate overview presentation is not necessary, got to change my practice. 18 years. So if I can save somebody 18 years of pain and suffering and killing meeting time, I will be eternally grateful. Does that resonate?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's also about how things have moved, right? I mean, the times change, and possibly when you started 18 years before, it was okay because people may need to know about who you are and so on. But maybe 5 years down the line, people really didn't need to know that anymore, and things started changing. So I think sometimes,
two areas on that. One is you're absolutely correct. There was an enormous amount of momentum in the 1980s. You did a corporate overview presentation after you were able to secure a meeting because your prospect probably didn't know about you. You could have sent them in that thing called post service. You could have sent them in the mail, brochures and fact sheets and so forth, and maybe they scanned them. But the way that your prospect learned about you as an organization was either word of mouth or direct through a corporate overview presentation and a discussion. However, with the advent of the internet, as the 90s progressed into the late 90s, that's when it became ridiculous because they would not have invited you in, to continue to use that example, for a meeting if they had not yet vetted you as a viable vendor. So the corporate overview presentation became a dinosaur that didn't know its time had passed.
absolutely.
And here's another change that's hugely important and probably is a little bit of an anathema to you and me. Most populations today don't want to open a big, thick methodology book and be intimidated to have to read through it. Instead, what do they want? Bite-sized learning. Give me something that I can consume in 1, 2, or 3 minutes. Give me a TikTok. Give me a YouTube video that's no longer than 3 minutes. Give me an automated demo that's no longer than 3 minutes. Well, that's one of the wonderful things about most of these stories. I think you noted you can read most of these stories in about, 2 to 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And so that's also recognizing that a lot of learners today and old learners would prefer you to get to the point, deliver the message crisply, convincingly, with a little bit of humor and maybe a thought on the end type of thing, but to do it in 2 to 3 minutes and be done and move on to the next one.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there is definitely I am sort of personally old school. I like long form, but it's true that there are many things which do not need long form, and putting that into long form will be torture. So why would you do that?
Exactly
right?
that. My hope in many cases is that as people read these stories, they two things happen. One is they take away that bit of learning and they actually apply it. And number two, they get intrigued enough to dig into the methodology that these stories either represent or are drawn from.
Right.
And so they do go for a little bit of deeper learning. When I'm doing recreational reading, which is typically half business and half fiction or historical fiction or other things, I often bounce back and forth. I'll read the business book, or right now I'm reading some stuff by Simon Winchester about there's a book called, it's just about 3 years old. It's called Knowing What We Know, which is about communication of information, data to information, to knowledge to wisdom, for example, knowing that what we know, and some really fascinating stuff in it. However, I couldn't sit and read that in a in a single linear series of days. I read a few sections and then I put it down and I pick up something else for a day or two, and then I say, I gotta pick that up again. So I'm just trying to a certain degree map to the way we all as learners prefer to consume information.
I agree, because especially if something is dense and something is, if you look at any of your other books, for instance, it's not easy to actually absorb and believe that you remembered everything you read. It's not that, it's not that if I'm doing discovery or great demo, I'm not going to understand as I'm reading. I will understand as I'm reading. But if I've read 10 chapters, I don't think I'll be able to say with certainty that I remember what I read in chapter 2.
Yeah.
That's with a book, with a subject which I spend a lot of time with.
There was a study, I'd have to find the reference for it, but there was a study that was done. It's been pretty well confirmed, I think, numerous times, where they said that the amount of information a typical person retains from reading a book, not a novel or a book of fiction that is a story, but rather a book about methodology or skills that you're trying to learn, we retain approximately 10% of what we read, which is why people underline, they put in sticky notes, they dog-ear pages, because they're trying to find ways to retain more than that. But 10% is about what we retain for each time we read it. It turns out when you see visuals of something, like in a demo, the retention rate goes up to about 30%. When you do a book club where you discuss the ideas, and book clubs are a great way to take advantage of something like suspending disbelief, the retention goes up to about 50%, because now you're thinking about it, you're asking questions, you're discussing it. Intriguingly, when you actually put the ideas into practice, if you try it out, retention goes up to about 70%. So throughout Great Demo and Doing Discovery, I've got exercises, and I'm urging people to actually do the exercises, because that's where the retention is strongest. What I don't know, and this goes back to the comment you made earlier, I would love to try to find, in fact, I'm gonna make a do this after our session here, how much storytelling or stories increase retention above, if you will, just the straight ahead reading of facts and skills. So I suspect it's pretty high. I suspect it's up there between 50 to 70, maybe even higher percent, because of the way we are wired to capture and retell stories.
So I'll slightly change gear here. Can you pick up one or two stories from this collection and tell me how you sort of came about and how you integrated that into your workshops and your narrative of the other books?
So I've told and retold over and over the logo slide story. When people would ask, what about a corporate overview presentation? And I would say, well, I don't recommend it. And then I say, let me give you an example of why. And I tell that story, and you can see them go, oh. A second one that I teach or I use in doing discovery or doing discovery training has to do with the curse of knowledge. And the story goes as follows. I was out with on the road with Carol. I won't use her last name, but Carol, who was our company's really number one sales rep. She was terrific. And in fact, she had in her house, she had named each of the rooms after the company names of deals that had basically enabled her to buy and furnish those rooms. So there was like the Merck kitchen and the Roche living room and the Burroughs Welcome, that was before it became SmithKline, whatever. And there's the dining room and so forth. So she was very, very successful. And I was on the road with her in North Carolina at Burroughs Welcome, as it was called then. And we were meeting with a bunch of synthetic chemists to talk about a product we have that helps support their efforts called Reax. And we'd had a short discussion with them, and I was all ready to dive into a demo. And she says, hold on, Peter, before you do, let me ask you guys, tell me if you can just walk us through your current workflow of how you plan out a synthetic strategy for creating some new compound. And I looked at her sharply, and I thought quietly to myself, you know this stuff. You know this intimately. Why are you asking them? And fortunately, I shut up, and they went and they unwound it. It was exactly what we'd heard dozens of times before. And at dinner that evening, I asked the question. I said, why did you ask that? You already know their workflow intimately. And she says, that is true, but they don't know that I know it intimately. And I need for them to feel that I understand them I understand their situation deeply and completely before they're going to be willing to take a solution that I propose. And I said, I get it. It's sort of just because the doctor has seen 50 patients that day that all been complaining of flu doesn't mean that the next one's also going to have it, and you'd better ask that patient questions to confirm it before you offer your diagnosis. So that's the curse of knowledge. You already know all the answers to the question, but your prospect doesn't know that. So I would tell that story in doing discovery sessions for exactly that same purpose, to cause them to say, oh yeah, just because I've heard it 100 times doesn't mean that this particular prospect is yet comfortable with my level of understanding of their specific situation. Does that help?
Yeah, makes complete sense. Absolutely. Makes complete sense. And so many times, I think the psychology with which salespeople go in is that I can show them that I know, and I don't need them to tell me, because that will take away the whatever from me, so that I know this subject. And I think this makes so much sense.
I don't remember I love quotes, and I wish I could remember who said the quote that I'm going to misquote, but it basically says that, it's one thing to know all the answers. It's something even better to know all the questions.
Oh yes. I mean, I'm going to
I think
Google that.
I think that's
out.
Voltaire. I believe it's Voltaire.
Could be. When you think of when you are running your workshops with both discovery and demo, great demo, which one or two or three stories did you see resonating the most? Can you talk about one or two of them?
So I would say that most of the stories in the book are the result of them really, really resonating. Okay. I think one that had some of the greatest impact is a story that's titled in the book, and I would actually call it this in workshops, Snatching Defeat from the Jaws of Victory. And it was real life. I was in the middle of a workshop, and I was talking about how if you present too many features and functions beyond what somebody is interested in, you can actually begin to lose the deal. You can buy it back. And it's the manager of the team was sitting in the back of the room, and he said, and I quote, O-S***T out loud in the middle of the workshop. And I stopped and I said, what's up? and he told the story, which is related in the book, which effectively says they'd done everything right. They had done a great job of discovery. They had set up for the demo. The champion had 50 target end users for this application. He was all excited about it. He organized and brought the 50 people, the 50 target end users, into the room for a demo, which is a pretty amazing thing when you think about it. Got everybody there. And the pre-sales guy who did the demo, in the first handful of minutes, it was like the first, 15 minutes, he covered everything that the prospect needed to see. And then he looks at his watch and he says, oh, we've got another, it was 20 minutes. We've got another 40 minutes. And everybody in the workshop at that point went, oh, because they knew what was coming. And sure enough, the sales manager says, yeah. And he said, since we have another 40 minutes, let me show you some of the other really, really cool things that we can do with the software. And he did. He consumed the entire balance of that hour-long demo, the additional 40 minutes. The sales manager went on to relate that the champion, after meeting with the team, the 50 players, came back and said, you know what, instead of 50 licenses, what we're going to do is we're going to take just one. We're going to put it on an expert's desktop, and we're going to have everyone go to that person to work the problems. And the sales manager says, when he asked the champion, but why? The champion said, because the demo made it look too complicated. The users could not visualize using it themselves. The real lesson in this, and the sales manager pointed this out, is that if the demo had stopped at that 20-minute mark, it would have been a 50 license order, as opposed to buying it back and reducing it down to a 1 license order because of going on too long in the demo. So there are several lessons. One is, stop selling when the customer's ready to buy. Number 2, focus on the specific capabilities that the prospect is looking for and put everything else behind your back. It's not training. You're just trying to get them to the point where they say, I need to get me some of this. Right. And avoid buying it back. So that is a story that repeatedly resonated with workshop participants. And that's actually one of the ones that I heard retold with delightful fidelity and accuracy. So how's that?
It's a great story, and I can totally understand it happening over and over again. I mean, the temptation of showing off what a great product you have, I think it's scary, actually, when you think about it.
It is scary. Well, here's the most scary thing about it. This story had another little moral to it that I'm not sure I even related in the book. Maybe I did. And that is that this was the first time that the sales manager actually realized this had happened. And after he thought about it, he made this comment in the workshop. He said, we probably did this over and over and over and over. We probably were buying it back over and over and over by filling the hour with as much as we could pack in, as opposed to focusing on the specific capabilities, deliverables that the prospect actually needed. We probably suffered that repeatedly without ever knowing it. He said that was the first time they actually had a conversation where the champion said, yeah, it looked too complicated, and may have actually counseled him. If you just stopped the demo at 20 minutes, you would have had a 50-seat order.
Yeah. And I
lessons learned.
Yeah. So that's my other question to you. And in fact, are people actually learning the lessons?
I think they are. And I think the stories are actually one of the best ways for people to learn them, because they are relatable. They're real life. They've got an element of surprise. They're engaging. There's a little bit of humor in it. And as a result, the lesson gets retained. And so they do tend to learn from it. That's what I've heard back. And again, that's actually why I said, you know what? I should write a bunch of stories. I should write down these stories and, try to help people out so they don't have to spend 45 years learning the hard way.
I know. This is great. And I think I'm going to enjoy. I mean, as I said, I don't read any of the books before I do the interview for my own reasons. But I'm really looking forward to going through this, because I'm sure I'm going to retail some of these stories to folks when I chat with.
I'm looking forward to hearing them.
Absolutely.
Bits About Books is brought to you by PitchLink, the buyer-seller engagement platform. PitchLink makes buying easy by enabling high-quality engagement between buyers and sellers through its presentation and discussion modules. Sellers create customized sales narratives using sales collaterals and personal videos, and reach out to prospects through a non-intrusive, buyer-qualified engagement. PitchLink requires no installation or download and holds the entire repository of sales collaterals and buyer-seller conversations. Talk to us to know more about how you can engage with customers without intrusion. Call us on 99021 631 32.
Peter, thank you so much. I really appreciate your taking the time early in the morning. I know no matter what you tell me, 8 a.m. is not a nice time to get on a
It's
recording.
all good.
But thank you so
and
much.
I appreciate you staying up late as well.
It's not really that late. I mean, it's now 10 past 9 in the night, which is not
that's
too
not
bad.
too bad.
It's not too bad at all. Okay. Well, so thank you so much, and I look forward to talking to you again.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
We have a great lineup of authors like Charles Green, Enrico Gallorini, Brad David Ball, and Ramli John over the next few episodes, with insightful conversations on breakthrough books on sales, marketing, business, and events. Subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you do not miss a single episode. Thanks for listening. Thank you for being with us today on Bits About Books, where we talk to authors about breakthrough books on sales, marketing, and business. We hope this conversation helped inform and motivate as we all navigate a rapidly changing business environment. For us, these are enlightening conversations enriched with knowledge and expertise. We encourage you to go out and buy the book to learn firsthand and implement some of the great ideas we discussed today. We hope to have you with us again in the next exciting episode of Bits About Books. If you liked what you heard, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast platforms like iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts from, and give us a rating while you are at it.
This Bizcast original podcast is produced for PitchLink, the next generation buyer-seller engagement platform, where the mission is to make buying easy. Hosted by Subhanjan Sarkar and produced by Rajiv Aditya. See you next time and have a wonderful day.